ॐ नमो भगवते श्रीरमणाय करुणापूर्णसुदाब्धे कबलितघनविश्वरूपकिरणावल्या अरुणाचलपरमात्मन् अरुणो भवचित्तकञ्जसुविकासाय वन्दे श्रीरमणऋषे आचार्यस्य पदाब्जम् यो मे दर्शयधीशम् भान्तं ध्वान्तमतीत्यः अखण्डसच्चिदानन्दे परब्रह्मण्यलौकिके विलसन्तं गुरुं नौमिं सर्वदा हृद्यहं भजे. Day by Day with Bhagavan, episode number 7, 6/1/1946 morning. Mr. Lakshmana Sharma, known as Who, has come. Bhagavan was looking into a notebook in which Mr. Sharma had written out an English translation of his Vedanta Saram Sanskrit. I was curious to know what this Vedanta Saram deals with, and so was asking Mr. Sharma's son Kameshwaran about it. Bhagavan heard this and turning to me said, "This is the same as Mahayoga." There was some talk about Sharma's birthday, and Bhagavan said, "He says he is born always or daily," and referred to the 11th stanza in the supplement to Ulladu Narpadu in Tamil, which has been translated into English under the title Reality in 40 Verses. For looking up this song, he picked up Nortirattu, collected works in Tamil, from the revolving shelf by his side, and before putting it back, detected that moths had been at work on the cover. He remarked, "We have not been studying these books, so these insects have been digesting them." Afternoon. Mr. L. Sharma came and sat next to me. This morning he could not recognize me, though I was only about 3 feet from him. So I was advising him to undergo an operation for his cataract. He said that he had been able to retard the development of this disease, and that if he could do so in the future also, he would rather manage for the rest of his life with partial eyesight than risk an operation. Then I told him it all depended on what further lease of life he had, and in this connection I asked what the reading of his horoscope in this matter was. Thus we talked about astrology, and I asked Bhagavan for his view on astrology. He said, "It is all right. Adu Saridan. Why not? If one accepts the theory of karma, one will have to accept the theory of astrology and horoscope also." After this, Sharma, Dr. Syed, G. Subbarao, and myself talked about the science of astrology and whether there was any use or sense in knowing our future and so on. And then Mr. Subbarao told us that in the books on astrology, it is clearly laid down that what is destined to happen according to the horoscope may be modified to some extent by proprietary pujas, etc. Mr. S. Rao went on to say how the mere dust of the feet of men like Bhagavan, how a look from them can burn away all our sins, etc. At this, I asked, I have also come across some of these writings which extol the virtues of satsang. I should like to know whether these writings are to be understood as literally true and whether there is not some exaggeration in them. Mr. S. Rao said they were literally true, but that one must have faith. And I asked him why, if that were so, those who were responsible for those texts about satsang did not add the proviso themselves, but left it to commentators like Mr. S. Rao to add it. Thus, a number of us wrangled for a few minutes, but Bhagavan kept silent studiously, as usual on such occasions. Then we too became silent. Once before I had put the question to Bhagavan himself with reference to the 5 stanzas on satsang in the supplement to the reality in 40 verses, and Bhagavan only said then, Adennamo நான் இருந்ததை அப்படியே தான் எமுதினேன், meaning I have translated the verses as I found them in Sanskrit. Don't ask me. 7/1/1946 morning. Mr. Mahatani asked Bhagavan, it is said in Advaita Bodha Deepika that the Supreme Self identifying itself with the mind appears changeful. How can the mind coming from Maya, which itself comes from the self, be able to alter or change the changeless self? Bhagavan answered, there is in reality no change, no creation. But for those who ask, how has this creation come about? The above explanation is given. Afternoon. Mr. Ramachandra Rao of Bangalore read before Bhagavan his canary's work just being prepared called The Ramana I Have Known. After he had finished reading, I asked him when he first came to Bhagavan, and he said 1918. I then asked him if he was narrating all his experiences since then, and if he was doing so with the help of any notes or memoranda. He replied he was writing off all that had happened since 1918, and that only from memory. I was wondering at such memory. Bhagavan said, Nayana Kavyakantha Ganapati Muni would remember and give you the hour and date for every incident at which he was present. Night. Mr. G. L. Sharma seems to have prepared a manuscript on Gita Saram. Bhagavan asked Mr. Balaram Reddy to read it out, as it was said in that, only when there is complete devotion, the Lord will respond and take complete charge of the devotee. Mr. P. Banerjee, who has recently come after a stay at Aurobindo's, asked Bhagavan, is it a condition precedent for the Lord showing grace that one must be completely devoted? Would not the Lord naturally in His grace be kind towards all His children, whether they are devoted or not? Bhagavan, how can one help being devoted? Everyone loves himself, that is experience. If the self were not his dearest object, would one love it? The self or Lord is not somewhere else but is inside each of us, and in loving oneself, one loves only the self. The visitor could not understand how this was an answer to his question. I explained, Bhagavan has told us more than once, the Lord's grace is always flowing. There is no time at which it is not flowing, and no person towards whom it is not flowing. But only those can receive it who have developed the capacity. Devotion is a condition precedent, not for the flowing of grace from the Lord, but for your being able to receive and assimilate the grace which is there always flowing. In this connection, Dr. Syed quoted the verse in Bhagavad Gita which says that the Lord is the friend of all, the sinner and the saint alike, but that He is specially in the heart of those who cherish Him, and that such people are dear to Him. 8/1/1946 afternoon. Mr. Mahatani again asked Bhagavan about his question, found recorded under 7/146. Bhagavan replied, "The very sentence you quote says that mind is a superimposition, that it has no reality but is like the appearance of the snake in the rope. The text also says the Supreme Self, when identified with the mind, appears changeful. To the seer, the ego, the self seems changeful, but the self is the same ever, unchanging and unchangeable. It is like this. There is a screen. On that screen first appears the figure of a king. He sits on a throne. Then before him in that same screen a play begins with various figures and objects, and the king on the screen watches the play on the same screen. The seer and the seen are mere shadows on the screen, which is the only reality supporting these pictures. In the world also, the seer and the seen together constitute the mind, and the mind is supported by or based on the self." 9/1/1946 afternoon. Mr. P. Banerjee asked Bhagavan, "What is the difference between Jivan Mukti and Videha Mukti?" Bhagavan, "There is no difference. For those who ask, it is said, a jnani with body is a Jivan Mukta, and he attains Videha Mukti when he drops off this body. But this difference is only for the onlooker, not for the jnani. His state is the same before and after the body is dropped. We think of the jnani as a human form or as being in that form, but the jnani knows he is the self, the one reality which is both inside and outside, and which is not bound by any form or shape. There is a verse in the Bhagavata, and here Bhagavan quoted the Tamil verse, which says, "Just as a man who is drunk is not conscious whether his upper cloth is on his body or has slipped away from it, the jnani is hardly conscious of his body, and it makes no difference to him whether the body remains or has dropped off." Mr. P.B. asked, "What is the difference between a devotee and a disciple?" A friend here told me that I should not call myself a disciple of Bhagavan and that I can only be a devotee. Bhagavan, if we worship an object or person, then we are devotees. If we have a guru, then we are disciples. I added that his friend must have told him so for the reason that Bhagavan takes no disciples, that is, formally initiates none, and so it may be misleading if anyone says, "I am Bhagavan's disciple." PB. But what if I accept his teaching and regard myself as his disciple because I try to follow his teaching? I replied, Of course, you may do that, as Ekalavya learnt archery from an image of Drona. Bhagavan then added, after all, as in the above case, everything comes from within. First, the man feels that he is bound in the bondage of samsara, that he is weak and miserable, and that unless he leans upon and gets help from God, who is all powerful and can save him, he cannot get out of bondage and misery. Thus, he makes bhakti to Ishvara. When this bhakti develops and the intensity of his devotion is so great that he forgets his entire self and becomes Ishwaramaya, and complete surrender has been achieved, God takes human shape and comes as Guru and teaches the devotee that there is but one self and that is within him. Then the devotee attains jnana by realizing the self within him, and then he understands that the Ishvara or Lord whom he worshipped and had bhakti for, the Guru who came in human shape, and the self are all the same. Mr. PB's first question led Bhagavan to speak further about realization, and he said, there are no stages in realization or mukti. There are no degrees of jnana, so that there cannot be one stage of jnana with the body and another stage when the body is dropped. The jnani knows he is the self and that nothing, neither his body nor anything else exists but the self. To such one, what difference could the presence or absence of body make? It is false to speak of realization. What is there to realize? The real is as it is, ever. How to realize it? All that is required is this. We have realized the unreal, that is regarded as real what is unreal. We have to give up this attitude. That is all that is required for us to attain jnana. We are not creating anything new or achieving something which we did not have before. The illustration given in books is this. We dig a well and create a huge pit. The akasa in the pit or well has not been created by us. We have just removed the earth which was filling the akasa there. The akasha was there then and is also there now. Similarly, we have simply to throw out all the age-long samskaras which are inside us, and when all of them have been given up, the self will shine alone. He also said, Mukti, Jnana, Dhyana is our real nature. They are other names for the self. 10:1:46 afternoon. Bhagavan was perusing some verses in Tamil, Kannigal, composed by Mr. Venkatesa Shastrigal. He and his wife Salammal had been staying in the ashramam, but about a fortnight back they moved to Ariyannamalai and settled down there. When I and T.P. Ramachandra Iyer and some others went round the hill on the 1st January, Mr. Shastrier and his wife met us on the road and took us to their house, and there we had these verses read out to us. I mentioned, therefore, that the verses were not new to us. Thereupon, Mr. Shastrier said the verses stood at 27 then and were now 108. A few days back, Mr. Venkatrama Iyer brought news to Bhagavan that Shastriar and his wife intended coming here on Thursday. After Bhagavan heard it, he said in connection with some letter which had arrived here for Shastriyar, "It seems they are coming here on Thursday. Whether they will stay here or whether intend to go back, we don't know." When Shastriyar came to the hall, I told him about Bhagavan's remarks and added, "I mentioned this to you as I too don't like your having shifted there." Bhagavan said, "They came and said they were going to Ari Annamalai and live there. I did not say anything. Why should we interfere? They want to live free without being under any restraint or regulations as in the ashramam. They must have peace of mind wherever they may be." Speaking of Ari Annamalai, where Mr. Venkatesa Shastrigal was staying, Bhagavan said, "It is a good place. I used to stay there occasionally. Once on a Giri Pradakshina, we were caught in the rain and we stayed the whole night in the temple there. It was then I heard the Samaveda chant." 11/1/1946 afternoon. A young man from Colombo asked Bhagavan, "J. Krishnamurti teaches the method of effortless and choiceless awareness as distinct from that of deliberate concentration. Would Sri Bhagavan be pleased to explain how best to practice meditation and what form the object of meditation should take?" Bhagavan: "Effortless and choiceless awareness is our real nature. If we can attain it or be in that state, it is all right. But one cannot reach it without effort, the effort of deliberate meditation. All the age-long vasanas carry the mind outward and turn it to external objects. All such thoughts have to be given up and the mind turned inward. For that, effort is necessary for most people. Of course, every book says Chumma iru, that is, be quiet or still, but it is not easy. That is why all this effort is necessary. Even if we find one who has at once achieved the mauna or supreme state indicated by Chumma iru, you may take it that the effort necessary has already been finished in a previous life, so that effortless and choiceless awareness is reached only after deliberate meditation. That meditation can take any form which appeals to you best. See what helps you to keep away all other thoughts and adapt that method for your meditation." In this connection, Bhagavan quoted verses 5 and 52 from Udal Puyyuravu and 36 from Papam Puri of Saint Thayumanavar. Their gist is as follows: "Bliss will follow if you are still, but however much you may tell your mind about this truth, the mind will not keep quiet. It is the mind that won't keep quiet. It is the mind which tells the mind, 'Be quiet and you will attain bliss.' Though all the scriptures have said it, though we hear about it every day from the great ones, and though even our Guru says it, we never are quiet, but stray into the world of Maya and sense objects. That is why conscious, deliberate effort or meditation is required to attain that mauna state or the state of being quiet." Another young man from Colombo asked Bhagavan, "How are the three states of consciousness inferior in degree of reality to the fourth? What is the actual relation between these three states and the fourth? Bhagavan. There is only one state, that of consciousness or awareness or existence. The three states of waking, dream, and sleep cannot be real. They simply come and go. The real will always exist. The I or existence that alone persists in all the three states is real. The other three are not real, and so it is not possible to say they have such and such a degree of reality. We may roughly put it like this: existence or consciousness is the only reality. Consciousness plus waking we call waking. Consciousness plus sleep we call sleep. Consciousness plus dream we call dream. Consciousness is the screen on which all the pictures come and go. The screen is real. The pictures are mere shadows on it. Because by long habit we have been regarding these three states as real, we call the state of mere awareness or consciousness as the fourth. There is, however, no fourth state, but only one state. In this connection, Bhagavan quoted verse 386 from Paraparakanni of Thayumanavar and said this so-called fourth state is described as waking sleep or sleep in waking, meaning asleep to the world and awake in the self. Mr. O. P. Ramaswamy Reddy, the Congress leader, asked Bhagavan, but why should these three states come and go on the real state or the screen of the self? Bhagavan, who puts this question? Does the self say these states come and go? It is the seer who says these states come and go. The seer and the seen together constitute the mind. See if there is such a thing as the mind. Then the mind merges in the self and there is neither the seer nor the seen. So the real answer to your question is, do they come and go? They neither come nor go. The self alone remains as it ever is. The three states owe their existence to avichara, non-enquiry, and enquiry puts an end to them. However much one may explain, the fact will not become clear until one attains self-realization and wonders how he was blind to the self-evident and only existence so long. Another visitor asked Bhagavan, what is the difference between the mind and the self? Bhagavan, there is no difference. The mind turned inwards is the self, turned outwards it becomes the ego and all the world. The cotton made into various clothes we call by various names. The gold made into various ornaments we call by various names. But all the clothes are cotton and all the ornaments gold. The one is real, the many are mere names and forms. But the mind does not exist apart from the self. That is, it has no independent existence. The self exists without the mind, never the mind without the self. 18/1/1946 morning. This is Thai Pusam day. That led me to ask why Ramalinga Swami's memory was celebrated on that day, whether he shook off his mortal coil on Thai Pusam. Bhagavan could not say. I also wanted to know if Bhagavan knew anything authentic as to how exactly Ramalinga Swami ended his life on earth. Bhagavan said nothing about this either. Afternoon. In the English abridgment of Srimad Bhagavatam, I found it said that Pridhu let his body be dissolved into the several elements of which it was composed. As this sounds very much like what is generally reported of Ramalinga Swami, namely that he got into a room and locked himself up, and that when after some days the room was broken open, it was found empty, I asked Bhagavan whether realized men could make their bodies disappear thus. He said, the books tell us that some saints went away with their bodies to heaven riding on elephants, etc., sent specifically to take them. They also speak of saints disappearing as light or flame, as Akasha or ether, and as stone lingam. But it must be remembered that all this is only in the view of the onlooker. The Jnani does not think he is the body. He does not even see the body. He sees only the self in the body. If the body is not there, but only the self, the question of its disappearing in any form does not arise. In this connection, Bhagavan quoted the Tamil verse from Bhagavatam already referred to in the entry under 9.146, and at this time he made us take out both the Sanskrit verse and the Tamil verse from the books. I give below the two verses. Deham cha naswaram avasthitam uttitam va siddho no pasyati yatodhyagamat swarupam daivadapetam utadaiva vasadupetam vaso yadaparikrutam madira madandha. 22 Hamsa Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 11. The body is impermanent, not real. Whether it is at rest or moves about, and whether by reason of prarabdha it clings to him or falls off from him, the self-realized Siddha is not aware of it, even as the drunken man, blinded by intoxication, is unaware whether his cloth is on his body or not. Bhagavan added, there is a certain school of thinkers who would not call anyone a jnani whose body is left behind at death. It is impossible to conceive of a jnani attaching such importance to the body, but there is such a school, the Siddha school. In Pondicherry, they have a society. Soon after this, a boy of about 17 years from Pondicherry came and asked Bhagavan, after hearing the pranava sound, what is the stage beyond it that one should reach? Bhagavan said, who is it that hears the pranava or talks of the stage beyond? See and find out, and then all will be clear. What is pranava, and what is that stage beyond hearing pranava of which you speak? Where is it? About all those things we don't know, but you are. So find out first about yourself, the seer, and then all will be known. The boy again asked, I wish to know what is the way to mukti. Bhagavan, that is all right, but what is mukti? Where is that and where are you? What is the distance between the two so that we can speak of a path? First find out about yourself and where you are, and then see if these questions arise. Night. The talk turned to various recipes suggested by various people about Kayakalpa. Bhagavan mentioned a few kalpas based on camphor, a 100-year-old neem tree, etc., and said, "Who would care to take such trouble over this body? As explained in books, the greatest malady we have is the body." The Bhavanoi, the disease of birth, and if one takes medicines to strengthen it and prolong its life, it is like a man taking medicine to strengthen and perpetuate his disease. As the body is a burden we bear, we should, on the other hand, feel like the coolie engaged to carry a load, anxiously looking forward to arrival at the destination when he can throw off his burden. 1946 morning. Bhagavan told me that my question about Thai Pusam and Ramalinga Swami was answered in today's Bharata Devi, which says that the Swami entered into the room for his end and on Thai Pusam day. Mr. Viswanatha Iyer read out the long article which compared the Swami to Mahatma Gandhi and quoted largely from his Arupa. Afternoon. Yesterday I suggested to Bhagavan that he might make a Tamil translation of the Sanskrit verse from chapter 11 of the Bhagavata, as he felt that the Tamil verse did not closely follow the Sanskrit original. So today, seeing Muruganar in the hall and talking to him about it, he casually composed the following stanza without paper or pencil in his hand. Night. Bhagavan wants to improve the Tamil rendering and bring it nearer the original Sanskrit. He discussed some alterations with Muruganar and told me that I was not to regard this above stanza as final. 1946 morning. Mr. Balarama Reddy asked Bhagavan about the Sanskrit verse whose translation is found in the supplement to Reality in 40 verses beginning Dehangada Nigasadam, and Bhagavan explained how he used the word Abhavam and Kavyakanta preferred Abhedam. Bhagavan further told us that this verse seeks to establish in two ways the proposition that the body is not I. First, by saying that the body is Jada, inert, and never is able to feel or say I, and secondly, by saying that when we have no body, that is, even when we have no consciousness of body, I exists. The talk about this verse began under the following circumstances. It seems one Bernard Duval of Morocco was here for about 15 days, some 8 years ago. He recently wrote to Major A.W. Chadwick, who has been living in the ashramam for 10 years now, that when he was a prisoner during this war, he learnt Sanskrit and even translated Bhagavan's Upadesha Saram into English, that later he had lost all those papers and that he would like all Sanskrit works of Bhagavan to be sent to him. In connection with this request of Mr. Duval, Balaram was finding out what were all the works composed by Bhagavan in Sanskrit, and Bhagavan seems to have told Balaram that the above verse was also composed by him. Mr. Viswanatha Iyer's mother came and told Bhagavan, Nagamma has written an account in Telugu of what took place in our ashramam at the Goshala on Mattu Pongal day. It is very good. Bhagavan said, Is it so? Her brother has asked her to write accounts of what takes place here. Is she here? Thereupon we asked Nagamma to read it out, and she did so. Bhagavan asked V's mother if she had read Ramana Gopala. She said, I have read only the Tamil rendering made by my son and want to hear the Telugu original. Thereupon, we asked Nagamma to read out the Telugu, and it was done. One Mr. Gokul Bhai D. Bhatt, a public accountant of Bombay, composed a few verses on Bhagavan and read them out in the hall. At my request, he also translated them for the benefit of all assembled in the hall. One Mr. Govinda Ramaya, Public Works Inspector from Chittoor, took Bhagavan's permission and read out Sage Angirasa's Guru Padaka. It seems he was advised to do so by one Subramaniya Sastri, a very aged Jnani past 80 years, belonging to Kanjivaram originally, whom he met recently at Ambattur. This morning, before returning to the hall at about 10 a.m., Bhagavan gave darshan near the cowshed to one Mr. Ramaswamy Iyengar, who, it seems, has been having a Ramanashramam at Kumbakonam for several years, who is now aged and infirm, and who has come with great trouble to see Bhagavan after many years, during which the Sarvadhikari had denied him access to Bhagavan for various alleged misdeeds on his part. The poor man had to remain in his car, which was brought to the cowshed, and Bhagavan, on his way to the hall, stood a few minutes near the car and gave darshan to his old disciple. The disciple just wept and said nothing. Bhagavan gave him one of his well-known gracious looks. Afternoon. I was very late in going to the hall, but before going for his evening stroll, Bhagavan himself was pleased to ask me, "You have not seen the final form into which we have cast that stanza?" and showed me the following. The body is impermanent, not real, whether it is at rest or moves about, and whether by reason of prarabdha it clings to him or falls off from him, the self-realized Siddha is not aware of it, even as the drunken man, blinded by intoxication, is unaware whether his cloth is on his body or not. Night. I understood Elinum in the first line as rising into the air or sky, and so asked Bhagavan how it was appropriate. But he explained that it only meant moving. He also told me, we have it concisely in the Sanskrit, but in the Sita Rama Anjaneya Samvadam, it is given in great detail and elaborately. This remark was due to the fact that yesterday, when Bhagavan could not find in the Tamil Bhagavatam anything corresponding to the Sanskrit verse, G. Subbarao said that he remembered the same thing occurring in the Telugu Sita Rama Anjaneya Samvadam. Today the book was produced and the relevant portion was shown to Bhagavan. Balaram Reddy told me that Sita Rama Anjaneya Samvadam is to the Telugus what Kaivalyam is to the Tamilians. When Kunjuswami arrived in the hall, Bhagavan asked him whether Ramaswamy Iyengar of Kumbakonam had left and what he intended to do. K said that R intended to stay for a month or two at Palakuttu till he recovered his health, and that the others alone would go back the following day. ॐ नमो भगवते श्रीरमणाय। सर्वं श्रीरमणार्पणमस्तु। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः।